Hey everyone, John here from Nintendo Life. And hey, it's me Xeon too. So today we're here to share with you our review of the Danganronpa Decadence collection on Nintendo Switch. So John, why don't you explain to everyone what the heck the two of us are doing here? So the Danganronpa Decadence collection contains Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc Anniversary Edition, 2 Goodbye Despair Anniversary Edition, V3 Killing Harmony Anniversary Edition, and S Ultimate Summer Camp. And rather than narrating all of these reviews by myself, one singular person, I thought it'd be nice to have Xeon come on board and we would just sort of tag team them together. Happily, John. I'm so glad you don't have to despair alone. Now, these reviews were, of course, written by the wonderful Stuart Jipp for NintendoLife.com, but were reworked into this video by us.
And? Hey.
The Danganronpa franchise is a vulgar, twisted little thing, rife with problematic politics, egregious erotic fan service, and some truly breathtaking ill-judged swings at far heavier themes than it really has any right to tackle. It is in many ways a reprehensible, immoral, and quite appalling series of games, and it's bloody great. A visual novel so trashy that even people who avoid the genre like the plague ought to get a kick out of it. The original Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc remains an imperfect diamond, a marvelously depraved multiple murder mystery that revels in the sheer strength of its cast and the sick nasty premise, reminiscent in some ways of the classic manga, Battle Royale, but with a little nod to the long-running Saw series of movies too. So what's the story? Why so worked up? Well, without spoiling a thing, which is very tricky with a game this twisty, you take on the role of Makoto, admitted to the mysterious and prestigious Hope's Peak Academy. Here you'll find 14 of Japan's most impressive ultimates, the likes of Byakuya, the ultimate affluent progeny, Toko, the ultimate writing prodigy, and Chihiro, the ultimate programmer. All of the class's various proficiencies come into play across a typical school year. But of course we are lying through our digital teeth. This is no normal year at all. Almost as soon as he enters the school, Makoto finds himself locked in with the rest of his classmates alongside a sinister little bear named Monokuma. Monokuma informs them for their freedom, they'll be playing a killing game. The rules are simple: murder another student and get away with it. If you do, everyone else gets executed, but you're free. Get caught though, and you get put to death. Macabre and pretty far-fetched, but Monokuma doesn't hesitate to demonstrate his control of the situation on those who push back. What we have here then is a paranoid environment exacerbated by the already big personalities of the various ultimates. You'll explore Hope's Peak in a first-person style, chatting and investigating in a style akin to the Ace Attorney series. You'll need to dig deep and collect evidence for the class trials. These play out as dynamic interrogations, presented as the various characters blurt out their takes on the situation. Facts and conjecture literally fly around the screen all around you, and armed with your truth bullets, you must blast the contradictions. Say, for a fake example, the suspect in question was stabbed, but one of the testimonies mentioned bullet holes. You'll take the victim was stabbed truth bullet and fire it at that statement. It's a clever, evocative, and exciting system. Less brilliant, sadly, are the mini-games that make up the other aspects of the trials. The Hangman's Gambit is the worst offender of the lot, making you spell out a crucial word to progress by blasting the various letters of the alphabet as they fly across the screen entirely too slow. It might be okay if it had any relevance to the game in any way, but it's just an extraneous way of padding out the trials. There's a rhythm action game that sees you pressuring the culprit into confession, and this does a better job of simulating the intensity of such a situation. And the trial-ending reconstruction of events that occurred via a manga that you fill out piece by piece is always entertaining. Outside of the murders, you can spend your free time with each of the students and form a bond with them. This unlocks new skills that can help you during a trial, but be mindful that your blossoming relationship could be brought to a sudden, bloody end at almost any time. Exploring Hope's Peak is simple, and while it's only a small environment, the ability to fast travel is present. It's still an ace-looking game, even 11 years after its debut. The heavily stylized pop-up environments and excellent character art have aged like fine wine, and the soundtrack by Takada is as brilliant as ever. The real star though is the story, and as much as we enjoyed the journey, we have to be honest, we felt that it didn't quite stick the landing. There's muddied motives and a confusingly vague, almost hand-waved denouement. Still, the post-game unlockables go some way to extending Danganronpa's life. Plus, of course, there are 2 major sequels to play if you need more gore on the go. The first Danganronpa offers a memorable killing game with fantastic, iconic characters, a genuinely funny and smart script, and some superior twists and turns along the way with well-earned emotional hooks and at times shocking violence. It's funny, it's dramatic, and it's very problematic, so exercise some caution. This is absolutely not a game for kids, but even some adults will struggle with some of its less savory and more overtly brash, thoughtless content. It's not enough to mark the game down in any way, but readers should be aware this is not a tactful piece of software, which for some will ward them away, but for others, we suspect that'll be a major selling point. We urge you check the game out for yourself. It's quite frankly a classic in the visual novel genre. We here at Nintendo Life give Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc an 8 out of 10. But there's a lot more Danganronpa, so Xeon, take it away with Danganronpa 2.
Now it's time for Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair, and this time it's on a tropical island? Now, being a sort of anime-ish game, you'd think that means the varied cast of characters take their turns to show up in swimsuits in a somewhat desperate parade of fan service. And honestly, you'd be right. Danganronpa 2 in no way subverts this expectation, and that's pretty much symptomatic of its approach to follow up the original classic. Now, don't take this as an abrupt write-off, though. We know what we're getting into with this series, and that's no small amount of sleaze. Now, Goodbye Despair is even grosser and slimier than the first game, which is an achievement of sorts. The murders are more brutal, the solutions more convoluted, and the cast of characters even more vulgar and over the top. It's all that a fan could ever want, really. So why do we not like it quite as much as the first game? Well, to some extent, it's a question of familiarity. As good as Danganronpa 2 is, it can't really help but hit smaller beats to its illustrious sibling. There's also less of a curve here, not so much in the difficulty, but in the way it eases you into its story. Goodbye Despair essentially takes a look at how Trigger Happy Havoc went up to 11, starts from that intensity, and never really falters. It's carnage from start to finish. It's very good carnage, but sometimes it all just feels like it's a little bit much. And you know what? The students of this whole entire game would probably agree with that. What was supposed to be a Hope's Peak school trip for the new protagonist Hajime Hinata has turned into a nightmare as Monokuma resurfaces and begins a second killing game. The new cast of students are as charismatic, interesting, hilarious, and downright entertaining as the first games, and all brand new besides just one returning character. And once again, you'll be making friends with peers and drying your tears as they drop like flies thanks to said killing game. Now, exploring your prison, Jabberwock Island, is a little more tedious than the school found in the previous game. Rather than relying on the full 3D maps here, you mostly run around on a 2D plane from left to right across each of the various peninsulas you'll visit. Fast travel returns, but traveling by foot is incentivized by the new virtual pet style minigames that sees your little pet gain XP with each step you take. The rewards for raising these pets aren't, in our view, useful enough to make them worth the repetition of checking in on them, however, but it's a shame to have a new feature in this sequel that we simply suggest you ignore. The class trial returns, of course, and unfortunately so does the Hangman's Gambit, even more obtuse, tedious, and frustrating than before in its new incarnation. Thankfully though, things have been amped up with the new Rebuttal Showdown mechanic, which sees you using the analog stick to quite literally slice your opponent's arguments to pieces before going for the cold death blow of pure logic. There's another new minigame that feels like a clone of old Flash game Seconds of Madness. You're careening down what can only be described as a snowboard slope of the mind, and must steer your board and body into the answers to logical questions as they fly up on screen. 1080 snowboarding was never like this. Within the debates themselves, the new feature is the ability to corroborate against another student's statement with your truth bullets, adding a layer of further complexity and therefore critical thinking to the proceedings. And it's a good thing, because Danganronpa 2 is longer and more difficult than the original, running to roughly 30 hours on a typical playthrough. There's more to do post-game as well, with more interesting, better unlockables than those on offer in Trigger Happy Havoc. As far as the visuals go, the game looks superb, bringing back the stylized look and another stunning soundtrack to boot. If anything can be criticized though, the Jabberwock Island location simply isn't as atmospheric and creepy as Hope's Peak High School, but there are plenty of spooky vibes nonetheless, and the story's dramatic twists and turns will once again draw you in. Even sicker and more delightfully disturbing than the marvelous original, Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair doesn't match its predecessor in some ways, but makes up for its shortcomings in others. Once again, we'd argue that the journey is better than the destination. We thought the first game's ending was nearly incomprehensible trash, and this one is even worse, but it's absolutely a journey well worth taking, as the brilliant cast and smart murder mystery gameplay once again sucked us in and didn't let go. An aesthetic and narrative treat, Danganronpa 2 is an easy recommendation, and we're delighted it's finally made the leap to Switch. We here at Nintendo Life give Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair Anniversary Edition on the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10.
Everything was leading up to this. Danganronpa, Danganronpa 2, the anime Danganronpa 3, even the god-awful, mercifully not re-released on Switch Ultra Despair Girls. It has all led to Danganronpa V3 killing Harmony, the crowning achievement of the series, and quite frankly, one of the best visual novels ever produced. There's no avoiding this, so we'll leave with the fact that Danganronpa V3 is a contentious, challenging game. Some will scoff at the idea of something so avowedly crass having any higher-minded ideas at play, but V3, more so than any other video game we've ever played, is a work of auto-criticism, an existential piece of thinking that has its cake and eats it quite gleefully. And that's going to infuriate some gamers. We, though, were spellbound. Even if V3 isn't 100% successful in sticking to its guns, and it isn't, the sheer ambition to push and push boundaries not just of taste, but of storytelling, of the genre, of video games. But we digress. At its heart, V3 is more of the same. A new school, new students, another killing game. The biggest and best of the lot, with the best conundrums, the best characters, the best twists, and the most variety. Everything in V3 has been amped up, the soundtrack is the best one yet, the visuals have been overhauled, and the game length is much longer. It's even more packed with fantastic content to keep you coming back, even when you finish the main story. While the usual exploration, investigation, and free time are all present, the class trials have been hugely revamped and even more dynamic and more complex than ever. The most interesting new mechanic is, well, perjury. Now, as well as your truth bullets, it's possible to unleash lie bullets, contradicting information that you know to be true for the purposes of ultimately furthering your point down the road. Debate can also break out into carnage with everyone talking over each other. This is an extension of the usual truth bullet gameplay, and a smart little wrinkle forcing you to multitask and choose carefully where you fire your statements. There's also a new feature called Debate Scrum that sees you engage in a quick-fire back-and-forth exchange between students. You must counter opposing views or challenges with rapidly selected keywords that trigger a proper rebuttal. It's thrilling stuff, and unlike most minigames, it actually works as part of a trial rather than being a somewhat confusing artifice. Speaking of confusing artifice, the Hangman's Gambit game is back yet again, but this time it's marginally less crap by virtue of not keeping you waiting around for quite so long. You've got to shine a spotlight on the letters this time, so it's more a matter of checking everywhere than simply sitting and hoping, but still it feels totally extraneous. The second game's logic dive has been replaced with Psyche Taxi. This is basically Outrun, but with questions. It's fine, if a little overlong. The final major new minigame is Mind Mine. This is sort of a cross between Minesweeper and puzzle titles such as Mr. Driller. The storyline here is extensive at roughly 40 hours in length, but we never got bored thanks to the sheer imagination at play and just how entertaining and frequently hilarious the characters are. There's truly an unforgettable cast, and the murders are grotesquely inventive. The story too goes places you could never even guess. That sounds like hyperbole, but Danganronpa V3 really is that good, really is that smart. Other than the usual Hangman's Gambit moan, the only real fault we could find with the game is a degree of lag on the system menu, but we'd be surprised if this wasn't removed in a day one patch. And after beating the game, you unlock a brand new, extensive board game style mode that takes characters from across the entire Danganronpa series. There's also a shockingly compelling in-game casino to explore and get hideously addicted to. Without spoiling anything, it's difficult to get across why Danganronpa V3 is so good, so we'll keep it simple. You'll come into this game baffled as to what the writers were thinking with some of these characters, and walk away loving each and every one of them. There isn't a single moment of slack throughout the entire 40-hour playthrough, as the most extensive post-game of any titles in the series, and one of the best endings to a game ever made. Go in blind, and we promise you'll be in for a ride of your life. We here at Nintendo Life give Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony a 9 out of 10. But we're still not done, so Xeon, take us to the ultimate summer camp.
As we've established previously, Danganronpa is pretty unpleasant in its narrative. Thankfully, though, it has managed to avoid bringing said themes outside of its world, outside of the fictional space that makes it somewhat more palatable. Now, Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp unfortunately rather breaks that promise. The bonus game element of the Danganronpa Decadence package, though also available separately, Ultimate Summer Camp is an expansion of a post-game feature from Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony, the strangely titled Ultimate Talent Development Plan. Here, you're presented with a similar board game structure. Pick a character from the cast of all 4 games, even the insipid and unported Ultra Despair girls, and take them out onto the tiles, literally rolling dice, playing cards, and watching your stats shoot up. Now, the problem with this board game video game is that you can't actually play as a character unless you have one of their trading cards, which you collect from a series of gacha machines using various currencies. And yes, there's a vending machine that you pay for with real-world money. And with that, Danganronpa finally crossed over from a gross game into a gross game, incentivizing these microtransactions with a minuscule drop rate in the main game. If this were a free-to-play title, we'd still disapprove, but at least it would make some semblance of sense. But it isn't. This on its own is a $20 game, which is difficult to even consider budget. You can start out playing the game as one of the main characters from the mainline series games, but those are your only options. Now, it's worth noting that the vending machine real-world money feature was not active during the review period. The game would just hang whenever we tried to select that option. So all of this could change last minute, but let's face it, that's probably not going to happen. Now, being disappointed in the financial structure of Ultimate Summer Camp is one thing, but is the game actually any good? Honestly, nah, not really. But will series fans enjoy it? Most likely, yeah. Now, that may seem a little disparate, but the bulk of the interesting content here is an absolute surplus of interaction between characters from the entire series. Beloved fan favorites who weren't able to hang out due to being in different titles or, well, being horribly murdered to death makes the unthinkable possible. This is the stuff fan dreams are made of, and the game boasts 1,000 new interactions. We're not 100% convinced that's on the level though. While the vast majority of what we witnessed in our dozens of playthroughs was unique, there were a good number of interactions repeated with only the host character changed. The meat of the game throws you into a recreation of Danganronpa 2's Jabberwock Island, seeing you roll dice to progress around the expansive board, with each tile offering a different outcome. There are spaces that increase your stats, spaces where you'll encounter an event, spaces where you'll meet another character, or most commonly, spaces where you'll get into a battle with one of many Monokuma-based baddies. These consist of JRPG-style turn-based battles, but presented in the simplest way possible, with simple stats and limited choices. You can increase the variety here by leveling up your character with various different collectible fragments, but in our experience, pumping points into our overall strength was always more effective than defensive spells or elemental attacks. You'll also acquire cards that allow various effects, such as double or triple dice rolls, the ability to warp to a random tile, or to a shop, or most useful, to automatically succeed in chance-based events. This is most useful as there are random encounters with V3's monocubes that can dramatically hinder your progress if you aren't lucky enough with the draw, and the success card negates that issue. There are assigned missions to defeat various mono beasts and collect items from around the board, which in turn unlock new areas to explore, but it's all rather open and optional. You can make a beeline for good equipment in order to progress further into the board and achieve higher stats from tougher enemies, or try to focus on a certain attribute if that's what you want to take into the next section when your time is up. And then after 50 turns, your game is over and you can take your developed character into battle mode as part of a squad of 4, overcoming turn-based fights in a linear order as you ascend Despair Tower. What this amounts to is a less interesting version of a dungeon crawl bonus mode from V3, where many battles simply become a matter of attrition. Success gives currency and tickets to spend with Danganronpa 2's Monami in order to unlock cards in the gacha machine. Various in-game achievements also unlock these coins, but as mentioned, the drop rate is so slow and the conditions are so grindy that dropping real money will start to seem real tempting. While it's a fun time for fans, Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp is a total grindfest and plays almost the exact same way every time. With gameplay that's both luck-based and uninspiring, it's an incredibly tough recommendation to anyone but devoted series obsessives. We found it compelling, yes, games don't take that long, but it is repetitive to a fault, and by design. Bizarrely, there are some ways in which it's less irritating and compelling than the equivalent unlockable feature in Danganronpa V3, and that was a free post-game bonus. Ask yourself if you really need to spend money to see the characters hang out in swimsuits, and make your decision from there. We here at Nintendo Life give Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp on Nintendo Switch a 5 out of 10.
And with that is Danganronpa Decadence. Remember, each game is sold individually on the eShop, or you can buy them as a bundle in a physical version, being Decadence. Every review was done by Stuart Jip, and we hope combining them and kind of splitting them between us made this a bit more digestible. Anyway, let us know what you guys think about Danganronpa in the comments below, and of course get that subscribe button and stab it, but don't let anyone know, because it's the only way to be free. And we'll see you next time. Bye everyone.